Recently, we took a look at how we could use the Pyro source spread node to create a growth simulation. So I just wanted to add on to that a little bit and show how we can use that data to drive a Pyro simulation as well. So let's take a look at this. First of all, this project file will be available in the Patreon link in the description. So if you want to grab the project files, go ahead and head on over there and grab them and follow along. But I have our logo that I've imported in here along with an unpack node just because it is an Alembic. And then I've got a couple things over here that we'll be using in just a moment. So let's start off by creating some thickness to this object. So we'll do a poly extrude. Set the distance to like 0.02 just to give it a little bit of thickness. And let's output the back so we have a back side to our geometry. Now, like I said, we're going to be using the Pyro source spread, so we do need to give this a little bit more subdivisions. So let's drop in a subdivide node, and let's set this to 2. This will give us a cleaner look across our geometry. And then in order to do this, if you paid attention in the last video on the Pyro source spread, we need to create basically a starting point with some temperature. So let's create a group. We're going to set this to points, disable the base group, and set to keep it in bounding region with a bounding object. And that's where these guys come into play. So I just have some spheres that have selected some points here for us. And that sets us all up to create an attribute create for our temperature. So we'll set our group equal to that group 1. We'll create a temperature attribute, and we'll set that value equal to 1. And that gives us everything we need to create the Pyro source spread. Source spread. And in here, if I click play, it just kind of fizzles out right at the beginning. You can see we have a little bit of temperature going on, and actually a little bit of burn going on, but it fizzles out pretty much right away. And like I said, if you paid attention in the last video, that's because we need to change a few settings. Number 1, we need to change this cooling rate. So I'm going to drop this down pretty heavily, maybe something like this. And click play. Kind of grows across our mesh a little bit, but I want it to grow a little bit faster. So there's 2 things that we can do with this. Number 1, we can crank up this rate in here. Maybe, I don't know, somewhere around there. And then we can also just change the combustion, and this will allow us to drop the ignition temperature so that it takes a lower temperature to ignite. So I'll click play now, and you see we get some things going on. Now, something that I didn't do in the intro simulation, so if you're going through the project files, pay attention here, but you see we have some things going on right here with our temperature. Basically, what it's doing is burning through the fuel before it can inject more in there. So it's burning through it all, and that's going to cause some issues later on. And I think we can just correct this by just giving this some initial fuel. So we'll do something like 30, and I think that should give it enough that that doesn't happen. And that will be an issue later on when we actually go to create the growth of this mesh. Makes it look weird when the final animation comes out, but I believe that should correct it. We'll take a look here in a bit, but I do want to do a couple of other things first. So first of all, I want to change the noise. So I want to take a look at this. This is a pretty big, if I look at the burn again, actually, this is a pretty uniform growth along the edge here, especially when we get over here. You see that it is very, very uniform. It's not really broken up at all, so we want to break that up a little bit. Let's take a look at this diffusion, and let's drop this element size down quite a bit. We're going to go even a little bit lower than that. Be like point, I don't know, somewhere around there. Now if we take a look at our burn and press play, you can see that that has broken up that edge quite a bit. Gives us a lot better looking growth, a more random growth along the edge here. Actually, it gives us something pretty close to what we had before. So this is where the project file will kind of split off in 2 different directions. And one side, which will be the left side, will be the growth simulation. The right side is going to be more of the Pyro. So let's do the growth simulation real quick. So let's drop in a blast node because we want to just have this kind of grow and appear on in our scene. I'm also going to turn off the visualization here. And in this blast, we want to set this equal to points. And then we want to use some of the attributes. So if I actually look at our spreadsheet here, we have all these different attributes here. Some of them like burn, total burn, temperature. Those are the ones that we're going to be looking to use in our simulation here. So in specific, I'm going to use the burn attribute for this. So a value that I found that worked pretty well in combination with the error that we were having in here was less than 0.183. So we'll just type that in for now. But again, I think we got rid of that issue before by using that fuel. So if I press play now, you see we have this sort of an animation going on, which is more in line with what we're looking for. Now, there's something that I want to do in order to create an attribute for our shading purposes. And for that, I just want to grab basically this edge right here, and I want to kind of blur it out. So I want to use this edge as a sort of mask for the emission, if that makes any sense. I'll kind of look at that more here in a little bit. But just know, for now, that's what we're going to be doing. So we're going to drop in a color node, and I'm going to set this to black. I'm going to copy that. We will rewire that in. I'm going to set this to white and set this to points. And I just want to use the temperature for this. So like I said, I just want to grab that edge. If we look actually back here, we look at our temperature, we have this little edge that kind of grows across our mesh. So we're going to use that, which I said was in the temperature. So at temperature, and we'll do like a value of greater than 2. Let's turn off the visualization there. And you can see that now we have this sort of black and white mask going on. So from here, I want to use an attribute blur, and we're going to crank up this CD value iterations quite a bit, somewhere maybe like around there. You can see that that just kind of blurs things out for us instead of it being this harsh edge. And that's going to make it nice for shading, which, like I said, we'll use that here in a little bit. Now, I want to create the sort of growth animation that's going to drive the points that we're going to use to create our volume from. So we're going to do that with a attribute blur, and we'll bring that back up here. And again, I want to use the temperature attribute here. So we'll do temperature, and I want to crank this up somewhere around there. And then I want to blast away some values. So I want to blast away anything that is too large in the temperature. Again, we're just trying to kind of select this edge in the temperature. Now, we just blurred this out, so we're going to be selecting a little bit more. But we want to select that edge in order to spawn some points on it. So we'll do a temperature value, temperature value of greater than something like 1. We also, well, let's just take a look at what that does. If we drop this to points, so that gets rid of all of that. Now we also want to add a second value in here. So we'll do and a temperature value of less than like 0.1. And that gives us just this little edge that we have right here. And this is what we're going to use to spawn our points on. This kind of grows across our entire mesh for the duration of our animation. This kind of gives us a nice little base to go off of. So you may want to cache this out. It's kind of up to you, but I'm going to just go ahead and scatter some points on here. And I'm going to crank this up pretty heavily. So something like 15,000 points should give us what we're looking for. And then from here, we want to do a VDB from particles. And this is going to be really big at first. So we want to drop this. Actually, we're going to drop the point radius scale first. So we'll do 0.01. And the point radius scale needs to be smaller, or sorry, needs to be larger than what our voxel size is. So our voxel size needs to be smaller, so we'll set this to 0.005. And we get this. But we don't want it to be a surface, so we want it to be a fog VDB. And you can see that we have some issues going on here. Most notably, there is kind of nothing that we're seeing. And that is because this is just a little bit too small at the current state. So we want to come in here before the scatter, and we're going to drop in a transform node. And we're going to crank this up. Something like, I don't know, 8 something. I'll hit F here, just kind of frame this back up. Let's actually just go ahead and jump on over now to the simulation that we started with. So in here, like I said, we just transformed this, scattered some points, did our VDB from particles, and this is kind of what we're left with. So the scene scale will matter for this. It will kind of cause some issues once you bring it into the solver. So again, I am using the Axiom solver for this. So if you don't have the Axiom solver, you can use Houdini's built-in solvers, but the Axiom solver is pretty good. I would recommend picking it up if you haven't. It's very, very fast. Let's go ahead and make a copy of this so we can take a look at what some of these things are doing in here. Jump back to frame 1. And actually, I will also make a copy of this Pyro bake volume. This is just makes it easier for shading. Let's take a look with this. All I've done in here is just added this little scatter here. And once I click play, you can see that we get some things going on. So this is what the final thing will look like once you have all of these settings set up. Now this is kind of slow. This is running off of your GPU, but this is a little bit slow because of the division size is fairly low. So let's go ahead and pause this, jump back to frame 1, and we're gonna come in here and we're gonna just up this division size to like 0.01. And that's just going to make things play a little bit quicker, give us a little bit better feedback while we're working and trying to dial in the settings that we're looking for. Let's go ahead and just visualize the Axiom solver for the moment. And with this, like I said, the division size is going to be basically like your resolution. So as you bring that down, it's going to be higher resolution. It's going to take more VRAM, but it will look a little bit better. Now I've cranked up the density in the sourcing just to give it a little bit more density. Makes it look a little bit better with the settings that I had set up. Now, I wanted this to kind of grow across the mesh, and I didn't want the smoke and stuff to kind of stick around for too long. So that's why I have this dissipation turned up. Let's go ahead and turn that down. You can see as I click play here, this doesn't dissipate at all. The smoke just sticks around forever, just continues to kind of move around in the simulation. So, like I said, we don't want that, so let's set that back to 0.81. And then I've just added in a few things here. So let's go ahead and go one by one through these. So turbulence in here, this setting right here is going to be like an overall scale of how much this is going to affect your sim. Let's go ahead and just turn this all off for now. You can see this is what it looks like by default. So it's just going to be kind of static, no movement going on. It's just kind of going to grow across your mesh. So once we add in one level of turbulence, this is going to be our large scale noise. You can see these are the settings that I chose for this specific case. But once I add that in, it just kind of breaks up the edge here just a little bit, adds a little bit of noise to that, gives us a nice little look. We add in a second level, which is this turbulence 2 with a smaller swirl size and some different settings in there. And we get just a little bit more breakup going on, especially in the edges here. See, just a little bit nicer looking there. And then I add in an even smaller scale turbulence. Once again, like I said, a smaller swirl size, and that gives us even more breakup. Just kind of gives us a little bit of a more swirly, smoky feeling going on, which is more what I was looking for. And then if you want to, you can add in some really small scale noise, and that's what I did with this disturbance one. So I just dropped this down a little bit, and then in this block size, it's set to be based upon our division size. So as you lower your division size back in here, upres your sim, this value is also going to decrease. Now this one's set to twice whatever your division size is. You may not want this to change because it will change the way that your simulation looks. So you can delete this and set this to a static value if you would like, but I found with my testing that this gives us something that I liked. Let's actually, at this point in time, go ahead and bring up our Redshift render view. And actually, in order for this to all work, I'm gonna need to activate this. And actually, let's just wire this into our null just so everything is working properly. And we'll restore this. So if I go forward here a few frames, you can see this is kind of what we got so far with our look. And let me get a different frame in here. Maybe this frame. So this is kind of what we're looking at with our noise. And like I said, with what we got with our different settings in this disturbance one, this doesn't look that great. But as we drop this, the size of our divisions, it's going to just kind of change that. I'm gonna go ahead and rewind this and just play. Get to one of these frames in here. Let's take a look at like this one. So this is what it looks like without that small scale noise. So let's go ahead and take a snapshot of this. See, this is frame 36. So let's turn off the small scale noise. Let's cook this up to frame 36. Let's refresh this. Let's take another screenshot here. We can compare what they look like. So with that, this is the current one with only 2 levels of noise. And then you see once we add in that smaller scale noise, it just breaks that up just a little bit more. And that's all basically you're doing with these different settings. It's just kind of breaking up the different values of your simulation. So we want to just add a little bit more noise as we go. And then again, this disturbance, once we have this set up, let's crank this out over here. You can see once this loads up, this is kind of what we're looking at as far as the simulation with that small scale noise. So just adds different levels of noise. It's kind of just a play with the different settings and see what you like type thing going on with that. These are the different settings that I used to get the look that I was going for. Now back, if we take a look at this, let's go ahead and just turn off that stuff for now. If we take a look here, bring our render view back up. Oops. You can see that we have this sort of a growth in our material. Now this is coming from our logo in here, and I've used this color attribute that we set up in here in order to create this sort of an effect going across our mesh. So if I take a look at our particle attribute lookup, this is what we start off with. Adding in a fire noise in here. This is kind of what it looks like in here. Let's turn that off. So this is the noise. Once we add that in with the mask that we have, we get this just kind of small breakup in the edge. From there, we just pipe that into a ramp to get the different colors that we want. And finally we have the final mesh. That's just blending, or the final material. Is just blending with another material that I had set up. Go ahead. This is the second material, and this is kind of the end color that we kind of transition into at the very end of the scene. Now, if I take a look back in here, it says that we cannot have channels that depend on time, which is only half true. If you come into one of these values, so for this, I have promoted this parameter. So you can just middle click on a value and click promote parameter. Holy crap, words. Promote parameter. And then you can actually keyframe this. So if I look in here, you can see that I have these two little green marks. That is where this color, this blend color, has been animated. So it does work, even though it throws you an error. So just keep that in mind. But anyways, that is kind of the basics of how I went about setting up this animation using the Pyro source spread in order to create the Pyro effects that we got going on and get this final look. And here is what we got when we add everything in. Kind of a cool looking animation. So like I said, hopefully this helped you out and you learned something. If you want to grab these project files, they are available on Patreon. So go ahead and head over there if you want to get those. But I do have a bunch of other videos on Houdini. If you want to learn more about Houdini, check those out. I also do some stuff on Redshift as well. So if you want to learn more about Redshift, you can also get some tips on that as well. But anyways, like I said, hopefully this helped you out and you learned something. Thank you all for watching and have a good day.